initially planning like what a game is from like a gameplay standpoint, from like in almost like an identity sort of way, right? So like you design, you're designing the experience behind it, which mostly, for me at least, because I'm very gameplay orientated, consists mainly of mechanics and like level design. It's a lot more than that, but that's like what it means to me initially. The workflow for making like say like actually putting things into the engine and like for people to play is like I'll try and design I'll line out what I want players to do in a certain scenario, then try and design like an environment that can encompass that, and then how that works. So like I'll try and design a puzzle, right, and what elements are included, what the player's going to try and learn, what they're going to have to deal with, and then I'll then sort of construct them together in like a loose level design that I don't follow too much. I just try and follow. It's mainly just sort of like so I can digest it and use it as like a cheat sheet whenever I'm struggling, and then I go into engine and using the assets that have been provided, sort of construct them together to make a level that fulfills the purpose that I previously designed for. I design levels for the game so that there's actually stuff to play, and I've taken the role of level designer because I feel like I'm most in tune with what the core experience of the game should be and what I've planned it to be. For the same reasons, really. I've taken the role of making AI because I understand how they should interact with like the main core game mechanics, as they're all from, well, like most of them are from the prototype that I made solo during the summer. For me, the most fun part of being a game designer is watching someone play the game, right? Because I feel like it's seeing how someone will interpret and interact something that you intended to have a way of interpreting and interacting with. It's difficult because I definitely know that I enjoy challenging people to do things, right? As silly as that is a thing, as silly as a thing to say as that is, and designing experience like a video game is inherently an indirect challenge to the player. Like if you get any reaction, as long as it's a reaction that you can recognize, like whether it's positive or negative, I feel like that's really like that's the reward at the end of it, you know? Because like even if someone hates it, it's like I've just made this person experience a thing that I designed, right? Because even if it does go the way you want it or doesn't go the way you want it, it's still such like an interesting thing to see and like digest mentally, you know.
Game writing is very different from the writing that I grew up with and grew up reading and creating. And initially getting into it, there were a lot of hurdles as it's kind of more almost like a screenplay kind of format for the majority of actual like dialogue writing, because obviously outside of visual novels, there's not usually a lot of descriptive writing. It's all very much like shown. So that was definitely like a hurdle, and working with different people on my teams throughout the years and making sure that the narrative not only fits the overall story but also fits the art they're creating and like the dialogue or the text that I'm making, and making sure that all goes together. Narrative designer to me is someone that kind of oversees most narrative, and by that I mean storytelling, character, plot progression, kind of decisions around that, and designs the systems for the game. For me personally, I have a like distinguishing thing between narrative designer and games writer, and I think they're linked, but they're also very separate. So for On the Brink, for example, as a narrative designer, I work with Jay, the artist and co-programmer, to talk about what systems we want, how I think the narrative will tie into those systems, and what emphasis we want to place on it. So it wouldn't make sense to have like a marriage system in the game, right? So it's kind of thinking about what mechanics would make sense narratively and thematically, whereas kind of game writing is more writing the actual dialogue, getting everything in place. So I guess in a broad, very broad overview sense, narrative design for me is just like plot, world building, characters, pacing, mechanics, and tying it into the actual gameplay of the game. I think my process kind of varies depending on what it is I'm making, like genre-wise and like team size, whether it's a big team, a small team, or individual. I'm very inspired by everyday happenings. So things from my life, things on the news, things I see out in the world, and just kind of looking into people, like people watching kind of deal, right? So like I will be in a cafe or walking or just like watching a film and be like, oh, that one character, I wonder what they're like. And just kind of deep diving and looking introspectively into them as a piece within the world, but kind of making them the centerpiece. A bit larger and also quite isolating. It was kind of looking at inspiration from things like Wall-E, like Silent Running, just like sci-fi films from across like different decades, and kind of looking at the more grungy aspect of that, as that was like a major part of Jay's vision when he created the idea. And it was kind of looking into the sense of isolation and how it was created and how I could draw on the things I was inspired by and the things that Jay and I wanted to represent, but also put our own twist on it. And that kind of came in the way of, you are this lone tiny robot on this big ship and you are completely over encumbered with all these different responsibilities, and it's just you. And like that sense of responsibility and the kind of moral questions and conflicts we throw to the player really kind of helps drive the point home that this isn't the best society to live in this game, and there's no right or wrong answer, and it's very much focused on the player and how they decide the outcomes of the characters and the people in the game. It's just like one of those things, right? Like sometimes it's just something you have to do and you just kind of got to grin and bear it. But other times I think it depends a lot on how passionate you are about something and how much you really want it to work. And for me, that's kind of what makes it worthwhile and what keeps it going, is knowing that with every revision, I'm like getting closer to the thing I want to convey, and I'm understanding both my own characters better by this process of reworking, and just keeping the idea in mind that this is something I really want to convey and something I am really passionate about most times. And also having a team around me, it sounds like really cliched, but just working with other people and being able to bounce ideas off of them and just kind of having discussions about something that you're both equally interested in really helps kind of keep that alive and keep it going. And it's way less isolating than I found other individual projects. So working in a team and having that level of collaboration is definitely one of the things that makes it easier.
So once you make things actually change on the screen, right? Like you would have all the models you want or work you want. If you want things, interactive controls, interactive user, you need to program like what we do when. And that's kind of originally what programmer's role is. My role in the team wasn't exactly that, because I haven't done most things you see in the game interactable. Most of that was done by Ed through blueprints, which is basically like a Lego way of programming. So you just take this bit, add this bit, and it's like very user-friendly and quick to modify, etc. And that was especially helpful because we prototype very rapidly and then we play test, and someone say like, oh, I don't understand this menu, or like, oh, I don't like how it interacts. And like, okay, change this entire thing. And if I program like this entire thing by hands, basically like I program on lower level language. So but I just need to say, draw this widget on this part of the screen. I need to basically write like 300 lines of code defining every piece of this widget and like being very detailed about it. The benefit of it is I control every single aspect of it, and I can make it like precisely as we want it, and I know it always will work precisely as we designed. The biggest thing I worked on through the entire project is a player controller, because we had very specific desire to how characters should feel, and some kind of like idea we phrased many times throughout the project is we don't want it to feel like Unreal Engine 4, the engine we're using. So whoever plays our game, we never want them to just oh, that's made of Unreal Engine 4, or like Unreal Engine or Unity. We want them just like, oh, that's a game. I have no idea what it's made with, but it's a game. The biggest challenge is I could program like a character programmatically, and I could hardcore like example how fast character is falling compared to how fast he's ascending when he's jumping. Like I could just hardcode it in. Problem is, I'm not the lead game designer, So like Ed leads the game, so he has a better idea of how the game's supposed to feel. And if I hard-coded all this stuff in, Ed would need to go to me. I'm like, hey, I don't think jump feels right. I don't think speed feels right. I think he should stop faster after he accelerates. And like that wouldn't work because that's basically like a bottleneck of me interpreting what Ed wants and putting it myself in. Plus, Ed doesn't know exactly what he wants either because there's playtesting, there's experimenting. We have no idea how high where I should jump. We'll find it out through experiments. So what my role was is basically design the system in a way that every single thing which could be tweaked is exposed to Ed to tweak in an easy way. So that basically was my main goal. How do I design every aspect of a character so it could be changed later without breaking anything backwards? Basically, kind of, it's very hard to explain to someone who haven't done programming, but with programming, difficulty is not linear. So it's not like if you're doing like project which is 5 times bigger, it's going to be like 5 times harder. Or it's not like if you're doing stuff in different field, it's going to be difficult just because it's different field or different language. Basically, in programming, you could be stuck on some hard problem for like a few hours, and then you could be stuck for 8 hours because you missed a comma somewhere. Like it's very non-linear in that sense, of like something very tiny, very non-significant in a way, just some semantics of how you type stuff in could freeze how you work for a very long time. And that's basically how it felt working on that. So I would tackle some difficult problem, and it felt like, okay, I'm 99% there to just deliver this. And then suddenly just one tiny last piece just doesn't come together. Things just don't work how you expect them to work. So it was frustrating. But as I solved more and more of these problems, I kind of learned the way of thinking and like kind of like pattern of how you approach to solve them and what usually causes them. And this is why I kind of think the documentation is a bit lacking, because we're so familiar with these patterns. Like we all done things in like similar ways for years. So every time we run into issue, for them, it's just like, oh, that was like this thing, I need to look into that, and it's probably like something related to this. For me, it's like, oh, I got an issue. Where do I even start? Typing in Google, Unreal 4, and like I have issue with and like name of something. It's like very, very broad. Like there's hundreds of reasons you might have issue with this specific thing. So just find out, like decipher which, if there's any example of someone having a problem for exact same reason as you are, that's basically what takes a very long time. Tackling a problem you have no idea how to solve, then finding a way to solve it, and yeah, being proud of that. That's basically the entire appeal of programming. Because actually, like the programming itself is just the middle bit you have to do. But the most work happens outside of you typing in words. If you're only thinking about solving a problem when you are actually already typing in words, chances are you already failed. Because by the time you start typing things in, you already have pretty clear understanding of what you're going to type in, like of what you're actually trying to do, like the entire logic of solving thing. So yeah, this kind of like weird thing about programming, because like most of the work you do out not even being behind your computer at all. Like you're just doing some other thing throughout your day. You're just doing some, some like anything, and then suddenly you just think, oh, that's how I could solve this problem. I need to go and try that. And you just write it down. You try to solve it. Like that actually works. Like it just kind of you throw in background, and because of that, it's also really hard to kind of turn off and not be in a work mode, because you don't really have working hours. You're kind of just always working. Like you're always thinking, because you also kind of take it personal. Like you're not being able to solve that problem. It's not just like, oh, I just will come back tomorrow and just do it for 3 hours. Maybe I'll solve it, maybe not. No, you kind of take it personal. Like I have to solve this. Like I bet I can solve it. Like I'm so close. So you're just not willing to let it go. So in some ways it's bad. In our ways, it's pretty much, well, way of living.
Time continuing. It's been fun, like, making sure that, like, well, I guess not making sure, but it's been fun that I've been able to, like, be in charge of, like, every single aspect. So it's all, like, cohesive, at least I think. But I feel like my biggest downside of, like, being a generalist and being, like, the only person working on this is that, obviously, I can't spend that much time working on one specific area of the project. Like, as I said, it's either programming, art, or like the level design sort of stuff. As a generalist, I've been able to like really improve my skills and like knowledge in a multitude of different areas, whereas previously, like when I was working on my previous walking sim and I was just doing the programming, I wasn't really like improving my art or like having any of my art in there, obviously, so I couldn't like work around like actually designing art for the game, whereas now I've been able to like fully focus on that. The whole like inception process of the game, like when I was coming up with how it would work, how it would look, that sort of stuff, was definitely like a lot easier than it would have been if I was working in a group, because I could like, you know, properly think about how the art would look and stuff. If I was working in like a group, it would be much easier. There's been like multiple times where I've been like, oh, I'm encountering a specific issue, and that goes for like art, level design, and like programming, that I feel would be much easier if I was like in communication with like a group working on the game. So like if I was programming something and I like got completely stuck with it, I couldn't just like ask another team member if there was like a workaround or like something that they could do on their end to like maybe do something different. Pretty much doing the same thing again, like when I go into the industry in some way, or even just like past this project, I do want to like keep like producing games that are pretty much primarily like just like my project, even like if I'm collaborating with some people on like some elements. I do want to like become a master of all trades.